Okay, real quick, if you could just
Yeah.
introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Ben Purkert. I'm an English professor. I teach creative writing. I used to teach at Rutgers. Now I teach at Sarah Lawrence. And I'm a poet and a novelist in my life outside the university.
Nice. And because of the work you do, I have an intro question. Let's say you were stranded on a desert island. What is the one and only book you would take with you?
Oh, that's a hard question. Well, practically speaking, it would probably be like an atlas, right? Like I need to get my ass off that desert island.
Yeah, yeah,
So as much as I want to give you like a beautiful
yeah.
novel, I think in a situation like that, practicality would be pretty clutch.
Yeah.
Um, or something about building an airplane, building a boat. But short of that, I think there's certain novels, certain books of poetry that have um, really made an impression, which I feel like is partially what your question is getting at. I would say it's so hard to say a single book. Um, I think that I don't know if you know who Elena Ferrante is. She's an Italian writer,
I've heard of her.
and she really like took the American audiences by storm. About more than 5 years ago, but less than 10 years ago, it felt like everyone was reading the Neapolitan series. The first one, there's like these four books, and they tell the story of two female friends, and I just loved them. I just completely loved them. I don't know if they were the most intellectually engaging books I've ever read, but just in terms of an immersive story, um, I just loved it. So I think Ferrante would be my author that I'm taking with me.
Interesting. So, that was just, I guess, a primer or an icebreaker, if you will. This next
Okay.
question, these questions might come from left field. They're probably not what you're expecting, but right now, I want to know, what were you like when you were 22? Like, beyond just what you were doing, what were you like as a person?
Hmm. I like the left field questions. Well, it's hard to see yourself, it's hard to step out. 22, I had just graduated college. I remember the feeling of being a senior. I was a senior at Harvard, and I remember feeling like all my friends were on this path, and I didn't know my path. I knew that I wanted to be a writer. Harvard, I'm sure Rutgers has something similar. We had like Office of Career Services. And it felt like they were trying to feed everyone into these pre-established lanes. Like there was the law school lane, there was the pre-med lane, there was the Teach for America lane, there was the consulting lane, there was the investment banking lane. Silicon Valley was sort of a lane, but it was still early for that when I was graduating. And I wanted to be a writer, and that there was no lane really for me, or at least that's how it felt at the time. So I think to some extent I was flailing. I worked at an advertising agency because I could be a writer there. And, stupidly, there was this one agency that had a job description for creative writer as opposed to copywriter. And I thought to myself, well, creative writer is how I see myself. So maybe I can, make not a lot of money, but a little bit of money and live in New York City and get my feet under me and see if this job in business, but creative still is going to satisfy whatever it is that I want to do. And it was a really good first job, but I realized that I wanted to go back to grad school. Personality wise, when I was 22, I think I was cocky. I think I was scared. I think I was drunk a lot. I think I was a sensitive soul, but I didn't really know how to show that, or I wasn't yet comfortable showing that. I think I didn't yet know how to express myself in the way that maybe I would learn to as I got older. Um, but I'd like to think that I was kind in certain moments. So that's who I was.
Interesting. Because I'm 22 right now. Do you think when you were 22, do you think you wish you had more confidence than you did?
Not confidence, because I said cocky, right? Like I think when I was 22, confidence and cockiness, it's one of those things where oftentimes it's a mechanism. Like you're insecure or you're actually not that confident, and so you project louder a kind of confidence. So I wish maybe I had had not more confidence, but just a little bit more belief, a little bit more patience.
Yeah.
Um, I think that as I get older, I realize how much of writing is an endurance game. Like a lot of people say this, but it's really true. A lot of the most talented writers are not the ones who start out with the most talent. They're the ones who just grind and love it. And, it's the equivalent of just wanting to be in the gym all the time, just working on your craft all the time.
Yeah.
That's not as sexy. Like in American society, we really seem to value like the prodigy above all, but the prodigies often burn out. And it's the folks who just like, love the batting cages, love the grind of it. And I think that if I'd had maybe a little bit more belief in myself and in how far that effort would get me, it might have made certain phases a little bit easier.
Yeah.
If I'd been a little bit less confident about talent and believed just a little bit more in work ethic, that might have served me well, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, I get that wholeheartedly. I like how you mentioned that a lot of writing isn't as sexy as people might assume.
Yeah,
In that regard, one thing I want to know is, have you ever had, like, you've been writing for a long time. Have you
yeah.
ever had moments where you had doubts, like, is this really for me? Like, have I spent so much time for something I don't even know if I like? Or have you ever had moments where you fell out of love with it, like you couldn't write anything no matter how hard you tried? I'm asking that because I make music and I'm in a band and I do music for my room, and I constantly, not constantly, but I often find myself grappling with, like, how do I know if I really like this? How do I know if it's actually for me? It feels
Hmm.
too intuitive for me to grasp. So I guess I want to know your opinion on it.
Yeah. I think to go with the music, and what do you play? What do you play?
Yeah, I play a bunch. I play guitar, I sing, I piano, stuff like that. Yeah.
So just to use the music analogy, I feel like I fall out of love with songs all the time, but I never doubt my love for music.
Yeah.
Uh, I've written things that I thought were dope, and then I come back to them to the next day or the next week or the next year. I'm not as into them anymore. That happens all the time. But writing as a game, as a practice, as a passion, that's never left me. Um, I I think even when I was working with you, when I was teaching at Rutgers, and I think you were a freshman, I was just starting to try to write fiction. I had just made that move. I used to only ever write poems, and then I started getting excited about writing this novel, which was largely connected actually to what we were talking about earlier, working in New York City and copywriting and working at an ad agency and all that. So I think that I guess what I'm saying is the writing changes. Sometimes you think it's going to go in one direction and it moves in another direction, but the overarching practice is just something that I need to do. I'm most connected to people through words, through language. And when my son was born, I can remember feeling pretty stressed out for those first few months because I was like, how do I connect with this person without language? Like the way I feel my way through the world is through words. And then the minute he started talking, it was like, oh shit, now I have access to him and he can access me. It was like this, it was in a weird way, like my son in my mind was sort of born. I mean, obviously those first few months are exciting and you don't sleep and it's beautiful, but in some real way, my son was born when he was 2 and he started using words. And I felt like I could build a connection there. So I don't think my love of language will ever change. I hope it doesn't because I'm in this for the long haul. But I think that doubting, is this the right word? Is this the right article? Is this the right thing I want to say? Like that's daily.
Yeah. So when you listen to music, do you feel like you care about lyrics more than the instrumental?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think so there's some and I'm not, you're, I'm sure, a million times more knowledgeable about music than I am. For some music, yes. Like when I listen to Joni Mitchell's Blue, which is like a famously beloved album,
Yeah.
I'm listening to those lyrics and I'm just going like, wow, this person is a true poet, is a true writer. But oftentimes I don't like music is not my art. Writing is my art. And so when I'm engaging with music, I'm not doing so as an artist. I'm doing it because um, I want to feel something or I want to listen to something while I'm working out or going for a run or driving or something like that. So I don't come to it with a knowledge set in the way that I do writing. So I don't think I process it quite like that. It's just I'm not even isolating lyrics necessarily from the songs. I'm letting them kind of wash over me and set a kind of mood.
Mhm. Interesting. Yeah, that wasn't one of the questions I had planned. It was just something to ask because
Yeah.
you place an emphasis on language and yeah, I love that. These next few questions I'm interested in asking because the previous professors I've asked, they aren't English professors. They're either in political science or something else. So I'm 22, and when I think of becoming an adult, yes, I'm filled with excitement and, all that, but I also have like fear and anxiety, and I'm scared to leave behind my community at Rutgers, and I don't know, the future is it's unknown for me. So I guess I want to know, how have you dealt with the unknown in your life and those moments where you just did not know what the future was going to hold?
Well, here's the thing. I still don't know. None of us know. Like I'm quite a bit older than you. I just turned 40 and my future is just as unknown as yours. It may be smaller, there may be less of it, but even that I don't know. And there's this poet, I don't know if you've had a chance to read him or if it's a name but John Keats
Yeah.
died very young. He died like I think he was 25 or 26. And there's this phrase that's attributed to him called negative capability. And he talks about how a lot of people in their lives have a kind of, I think he says, quote, an irritable reaching after fact. Like people need to know all the answers. They need to resolve all uncertainties. Whereas poets, in his mind, have a heightened negative capability, meaning that they are more comfortable dwelling with and sitting alongside certain unknowns, certain unknowable things. And that has always struck me as really beautiful. This idea that like a poet, and maybe all writers, but maybe especially a poet, is able to look at the world and kind of accept its mysteries rather than trying to solve them or shrink them. Um, so one of my favorite parts of being a writer is being surprised. Like I've said this to people, when you write a novel, it's a long journey. I would never have wanted to take it if I had known where the book was going to go. To me, it's exciting to watch a TV series when you don't know where the characters are going to head. And as a writer, it's a similar thing. I like to be surprised. So, um, in my life, I can be a bit of a control freak, but in my writing and in my art, I like to not know. So, you being 22, um, there's a lot of unknowns, but there's also, there's joy in that. Like the first job you take is not going to be your last job. And you're going to meet people there who go off and do different things. And maybe, you'll go with them or maybe you'll move in opposition.
Yeah.
I think that that's exciting, whatever that path looks like.
Yeah, it definitely is. There's more excitement than anything. I want to touch on what you said about not knowing the end of a novel. With your novel, did you feel like it wrote itself, or did you have to put a lot of conscious effort into writing it?
It's weird because the answer is like a definite both.
Hmm.
Um, in some real way, the novel did write itself. And I feel that way about poems too. Like I don't, I'm not conceited enough to think that I have some ear into the muse or the divine. Like I don't, like this idea that like the writer is a vessel and that there's this other, I'm not sure I'm quite there with that. But I do think that a good writer, when you're really in a groove, you're channeling something. Maybe it's the same for music too. It's like, Did Bob Dylan really write some of these songs, or did they kind of write their way through him? And I feel like being open to, I'll put it this way. When I was writing the novel, I was very, very open to where the novel wanted to go more than I was dictating where I wanted it to go. At the same time, was there effort? Like I revised the thing 20 million times. I put pressure on every single word. And that part of it was my own labor. Um, so for me, writing is very much an art and a science. There's the art of the discovery, of the surprise, of the leap, of the turn, of the twist. And then there's the like buckling down and just like mathematically reducing each fraction, like getting the language as tight as you can. And
Do you
that's a lot of work.
do you like the art or the science of writing more?
I love both. I mean, I'm a huge nerd, dude. Like my favorite subjects were English and math, always. Always
Yeah.
loved it. They were always my two favorite subjects. When I showed up to college, I was either going to major in English or math or maybe philosophy.
Yeah.
Um, so I think I rely on both,
Yeah.
but certain writers are more artistically gifted than I am. They're more creative, but I think that I'm well served that I can kind of I'm sometimes I'm not very confident in myself as a writer, but I know I'm a very good editor. And as we talked about before, insofar as a lot of the game is just grinding, being willing to put in that work is a huge part of it.
Mhm. Yeah. I agree. I agree. You can't go one way or the other. So, 10 minutes left. I have three final questions for you.
Cool.
So, um, I want to know, have you ever changed your mind on important things, changed your path, made last minute decisions? You can answer with writing or with just life, because I picture that's something I'm probably going to do a lot. I think I'm a natural born pivoter. So,
That's good. I think we need more pivoters. Like, especially in, not to like zoom out too wide here, but like especially in our really polarized moment where everyone just like watches their own news channel, gets their own feed, like being able to pivot, I think often is framed as a sort of weakness when in truth of fact it strikes me as a kind of strength.
Mhm.
I remember in college, um, we had uh like I mean it was fucking Harvard, so a lot of weird shit happened. But we had like presidential candidates come through and gave like town halls or whatever. And I remember going to one of those, and there was a presidential candidate, and one of the students was grilling the candidate about being a flip-flopper because he had been against the Iraq, he was like for the Iraq war, and then he was against the Iraq war. And he was basically, and the question was insinuating that like he had flip-flopped, right? And I remember thinking, look, I would have preferred if this candidate had been opposed to the Iraq war from the beginning. But this idea that like this is a weakness, like a gotcha moment, sometimes the circumstances on the ground change. Sometimes the information that you have access to changes. I'd much rather have someone with a nimble mind, someone who has the humility to say, you know what, I saw this issue from one perspective, but there are other ways to see this. My way is not the only way. And in fact, I've learned from where I was to where I am now. Like that doesn't feel unimportant for leadership or for ethics. I think it's actually huge. And it's when I look at where we are as a country, I can't help but feel that we have so poorly invested in the humanities. Like there are so few English majors now than there were when I was in college. And I'm not saying that English majors are going to solve all the crises that we face, but I do think the ability to reason with one another, to use language, to articulate our feelings, to express our disagreements, and also where we might agree or how we might change our minds. These are essential characteristics that we have let atrophy to an alarming degree. And I think, I hope for us as a people, as a nation, that we reclaim it and um, pivot, opening our minds, considering other perspectives, this feels pretty necessary.
Yeah. I also think English helps us with personal pivots as well. Things like changing your mind on something that you were adamant on for years. It's important to be able to flow like that. So, regret. Have you dealt with it in your life and how do you deal with it? Because I feel like I'm leaving college with maybe more regrets than I should. Little things like, oh, I should have tried harder in that class, or I should have studied harder, or I should have been nicer to that person. I should have been nicer to my parents. Like, you know, should have started earlier, stuff like that. So, how do you deal with these thoughts in your life?
Man, regret is a hard one. I think, you know, and listen, I would say don't be too hard on yourself either, right? Like, do I have regrets? Of course. I think I'm fundamentally satisfied by the career path that I've chosen. I love writing. You know, if it pays me well, if it pays me nothing, like this is what I want to do. I feel deeply proud of the fact that I've pursued it with the level of passion that I have. Having said that, do I regret interpersonal stuff? Do I regret some bad breakups? Do I regret, a lack of kindness at times, whether with family or friends or whoever? Sure. Um, but I also think, it's easy to beat up on yourself too. And um, I was raised like my dad is Catholic, my mom is Jewish. So, I had a little bit of both. But the thing that about Judaism that always spoke to me the most was this day of Yom Kippur, of like looking inward and atoning. Um, and I think that that's important to do, but you also only do it once a year. You know what I mean? If you were to do it every single day, that's no way to move forward. So that has always kind of spoken to me. This idea of like, let me take one day a year to kind of look backward, see what I've done, make amends where I can, and then move forward into this new year, hopefully a little bit wiser, a little bit kinder.
Yeah, it's like that Homer Simpson quote. Don't beat yourself up 100 times. Beat yourself up once and then move on.
There
Oh,
you go.
maybe that's sort of some religious undertones in The Simpsons. You
Possible.
do you think you're good at saying goodbye to things?
That's a great question. Especially moving as our last question, potentially. Um, Depends on what you mean by good. Like, you know, I don't think I'm clean at saying goodbye to things, but that's not the same thing as saying good. Like, I think part of why I'm a writer is because I obsess. I walk away from something and I'm still carrying it with me. I'm still thinking about that thing I saw or that sign that the person was holding on the street today or the news story from 2 weeks ago or whatever it is, right? Like I don't think that I'm clean. I don't think I know how to make a crisp break with things. But I wouldn't want to change that about myself either, because a lot of where I write from, a lot of what I generate from is a kind of reaching back toward what has happened. So carrying some amount of the past with you is not, I think it grounds you in who you are. If that burden becomes too heavy and you can't move on, then I think that, yeah, it's time to say goodbye. It's time to unload. But you're about to leave college, but you're also not. You're going to carry these conversations. You're going to carry friendships, romantic. You're going to carry, your education. You're going to carry a lot of those posters in the background. You're going to take a lot of things with you.
Mhm.
Some things you won't, but you might be surprised at what gets carried with you, 5, 10, 20 years down the line, 50 years down the line. Um, and I wouldn't want you to leave it all behind either.
Yeah, I think the caveat is when you do leave things, you have to feel the emotions of that sadness fully before you can have a good relationship with it.
Hmm.
Like, I feel like my best, not breakups, but like leaving things that have meant a lot to me, periods in my life, when I allow myself to feel those emotions fully, only then can I look back and be like, oh, that was a good moment. Like I'm not sad anymore. I'm happy it happened.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that.
Yeah. Um, that's really it. I wish we had time for one more, but if you have to go, you gotta go.
Let's do one more. Let's do one more.
One more. Okay, okay. So, how do you think an emerging adult could find himself and be authentic in a world that's becoming increasingly digital? Like when I look on Instagram or social media, people are gaining personality traits and acclimating to what's popular and they're becoming like everyone else. How do you think authenticity can stay alive in a world that is increasingly digital?
I think, and this is hard advice for me to take too, I think unplugging.
Mhm.
Like I think that in your lifetime, like in my lifetime, it's been a steady movement toward digital. Every year is more digital than the one that came before. But I don't know that we're not going to see a reversion toward something else. And maybe that sounds completely naive, but let me frame it to you this way. Like every time I have my phone out, and maybe I sound just like the crackpot liberal professor, but like, we may be being listened to, right? Like our technology, which empowers us in so many ways, is also quite threatening. And there's a reason why I think people want to communicate more than ever in like coded messaging apps or reduce their digital footprint, not expand it. You get more followers, suddenly you're a little bit more of a target, maybe in certain ways. Like there are really pressing reasons to pull back from a digital presence that I think, even like when you read a news article, the newspaper is monitoring like where your eyeballs are resting. They're monitoring like how you got to that article. If you subscribe based on that article, they're noting that too. When you sit down with a book, like a paper hard copy book, that is a private interaction that really only belongs to you. The publisher doesn't know at what point you put the book away. They don't know what your favorite page is. They don't know what page you circled. They don't know anything. And that is kind of blessed in today's environment. So I'm not some like Luddite, dude who's just like digital is the death of our. No, digital is incredible. It's enabled a whole lot of things, but I think that we are potentially moving into a world where we appreciate more than ever the benefits that analog can give us and the freedoms that we have. And is that a more authentic life? I don't know, but it's certainly a less distracted life. So when I write, it's hard, but I really try to put my phone away and not do the thing that everyone else is doing. If someone is on TikTok about it or on Twitter about it, I don't want that to be my writing because the other thing is publishing moves so slowly that whatever is hot now, when the book actually comes out in a year from now, it's going to feel old and stale. So if I'm chasing a trend, I'm already behind it. I'd much rather do my own shit and then let other people catch up.
Yeah, that's really good advice. We're a little over time, but thank you so much, Professor
This was
Purkert.
great. Nachi, listen, this was cool, and I hope graduation is awesome, and I'm excited. Keep in touch. I'd love to know what you do next. All right.
Yeah, will do, man. Will do. Thank you so much for doing it. Let me stop the recording real quick.